First of all, welcome everybody for spending some time with us on what is sure to be very, very busy, very, very cold, I'm sure, if you're in London, January afternoon. So thank you all very much. What I want to do is introduce myself. I'm going to go through a bit of housekeeping, and then the goal is for me, as much as possible, to shut up. And I'm going to let our hopefully much more esteemed panel take the lead on quite a few interesting things to discuss. So, first and foremost, my name is Paddy O'Neill. Yes, I am Irish, if the name or the accent didn't give that away. I am one of the VPs here at Kolleno, but I've been very lucky in my career to spend the last 10 or 12 years in software sales. And previous to Kolleno, actually worked with a company called Spendesk, who we're very glad to have joined us on the panel today. So my goal here is just to help facilitate hopefully a very good conversation. So before we go into, I suppose, introducing our panelists, I want to take a couple of minutes just to go through the general housekeeping rules, the things that tend to come up in every single one of these. First and foremost, yes, the recording will be sent to you. It might take us a couple of days just to get everything up and running, but certainly we'll get this recording across to you in the next couple of days. Secondly, for those folks who are in London or can make it out to London, we're hoping to actually get a follow-up conversation to this webinar in person sometime towards the end of February. I think February 22nd, if I'm not mistaken, is the day we've penciled in for that. But keep an eye out for a follow-up email from this. If you enjoyed the conversation, you want to spend a bit more time learning from all of us and just really kind of, I suppose, bouncing some ideas off each other. Keep an eye out and we will get started with that. So that's hopefully as much as you're going to hear on the boring stuff from me. And instead, what I'd love to do is actually start to introduce the three wonderful guests we have here who are very, very kind to spend the next 55 minutes or so with us here at Kolleno. So first of all, I would like to introduce Millie. So Millie, if you want to take it away.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Patty. So my name is Millie Hughes. I'm a part of the revenue team here at Spendesk. Been here for just coming up on 2 years, but a little bit of background. I've been working in tech for around 5 years. Really relevant, I think, to this discussion is really just taking some of the conversations that I have every day with leaders in finance who are often looking for ways to kind of streamline finance operations. So yeah, I'm looking forward to discussing some of the common topics and stories that have come up over at my time at Spendesk, which can hopefully resonate with everyone.
Thank you very much, Millie. And I suppose next up we have Gibran.
Thanks, Patty. I'm very excited to be here with yourself and the panelists. My name is Gibran Larabur. I'm head of finance here at Kolleno. I work closely with our team here internally, and prior to this, spent a number of years in the management consulting and finance space. So excited to have the opportunity here to talk through, our experience and what we're helping our clients with, and some of the key elements that are certainly top of mind for them as they work to streamline their financial operations as well.
Thanks, Gibran. And finally, we have David.
Thanks, Paddy. Yeah, delighted to be a part of this. My name's David Atherton. I've been in business and finance consulting for many years. Been working with the NetSuite products for 15, 16 years. Currently the UK country director at Staria, who are a NetSuite partner, and we also deal with planning and BI, and looking to share all the pains and challenges we hear when businesses are looking to transition, whether that's full ERP or BI or point solutions, such as Spendesk and Kolleno. So yeah, looking forward to this very much. Thank you.
Thanks, David. And thank you very much again, panel. So probably one thing to pick up on, and what I really want to drive this conversation toward, is going to be a lot in experiences. Because I think if the last year can tell us anything, it's pretty hard out there. And it's certainly what I know from many companies, it was very, very tough. Now, as we come into a new year, I know there's many reasons to be optimistic, but there's also, I think, a bunch of new trends on the horizon, things that, especially in finance, you have to get your head around. So that's where I'm really hoping to drive a lot of this conversation. And Gibran, I might pick on you first as our kind of resident CFO on the panel here. What do you think what's the top of mind finance pains going on in your head and from what you're seeing from many of our clients?
Mhm. I think, top of mind, especially in this climate, is really, how do you make sure that you have all of the information available at your fingertips to really make the most effective decision for your organization? How do you make sure you have the latest information? How do you make sure you have the most accurate information? And how do you do that in the most efficient way? And so I think, that's certainly top of mind for, myself and our team, and it's certainly top of mind for a number of clients. And it's how do we leverage, technology and a number of different solutions that are available to help enable us to do that, to make sure that we're making the best decisions at the right time with the most, accurate information possible. And I think that's certainly top of mind, especially in this climate. And how do we do that, most efficiently and most effectively with, the resource constraints that we have as well. So I think for me, at least, and within my team, that's certainly top of mind. And discussion with a number of clients, that's certainly top of mind as they go into the next year and try to see how they can leverage new solutions to be able to do that.
Yeah, and kind of really driving towards that, doing less with more, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Speaking of which, David, I'm sure you've probably spent the last how many years, but certainly over the last few weeks, I'm sure getting back from the new year, speaking to all sorts of different clients. So what are you hearing?
So, I mean, the challenge is predominantly resides around data and visibility. What we're seeing is because the market's tough, businesses are having to think about being agile. And being agile relies on data and systems and, the reality of what is happening in the marketplace. So supply chain visibility, fluctuating costs, currency impacts, effects, because they need to be proactive and they need to find other ways to grow in a difficult marketplace. So it's all about having a co-joined view, looking at data that is relevant and reliable and making informed decisions, both proactive and reactive based on that. That's the short version, shall we say.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's certainly the last 5 years of my life in fintech in particular and selling to the CFO office. It's just been growing and growing and growing. But Millie, you might be able to give a lot more context. I know Spendesk are probably talking to hundreds, if not thousands, of CFOs probably every day at this point. So, well, what are the hot takes going on?
Yeah, I mean, it's always evolving over the time that I've been at Spendesk, but I think that in the conversations that I have, it always can be grouped into three kind of main categories. Really, businesses often struggle to have control over spending processes, especially when you have various different types of payments going on within operational spending. Just to go off of what the others said as well, it's really about visibility. The knock-on effect of maybe ineffective spending processes is often that it hinders visibility, makes it difficult for businesses to have strategic decision making. I think also quite a hot topic that I've heard coming up more and more and more is the importance of interconnectivity of systems. A lot of businesses and CFOs that I'm speaking with are trying to implement multiple different either systems or processes to manage their spending processes, but ultimately they don't necessarily speak to each other. And that in itself is, again, having the knock-on effect on the control, on the visibility, but very importantly, which is a key topic of this whole webinar, is efficiency and automation. So definitely these are some of the main things that are coming up in the conversations that I'm having.
Awesome. I might actually, the panelists are going to look scared of me now. I might go a little bit off script now here for a second, because obviously the thing that's coming up here, it's certainly on systems, but also on data. What do you think is getting in the way of getting that kind of clean data that people need to make those decisions? Anyone? Feel free to volunteer.
I'll happily jump in here. It's fine. So it's interconnectivity is key for sure. Having the right systems to be agile. So, for example, if you're meeting an ESG compliance requirement, are your systems capable of capturing the relevant data to drive that, to produce the reports for compliance, CSR style reporting? And that often requires some form of transformation or digital change within a business, unless you've got the systems or you're working solely in Excel. And that becomes more and more time consuming for the finance office and the CFO and the controllers who are supporting all this collated, one-off report. Then the policy or compliance changes. Then we have a VAT change. Then we have a IFRS compliance change. And it will come back to visibility of centralized data and the agility to queue, pivot, add dimensions, fields it's so essential for the modern CFO because, and again, in a difficult place, people are streamlining. The CFO, the finance teams are lean and they have a lot of demands. So having as much support to auto-generate that it's just huge.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think as David mentioned, I think the interconnectivity is key to make sure that you have the latest information at your fingertips. I think the other key is also really getting an understanding of what type of data you're looking for, and how that's going to impact your overall strategic decisioning, right? And so for a number of our clients that we talk to, it's we want to have some line of sight into payments and the timeliness of those payments, how that's going to impact our overall revenues, what our aged receivables look like, and then from there be able to make some informed decisions from there, for example. So I think part of it is the interconnectivity, and then I think the other element is really getting an understanding of what is the data that you really need to be able to make a mark and really make those decisions.
Good, very good. I think it's certainly, listen, big data in general has obviously been becoming so much more of a, I suppose, backbone to any organization, in particular the office of the CFO. So I suppose it's very much going to be watch this space. But I think if we think about, I suppose last year there was a lot of trends that did come up. I know it was the year where operational efficiency, financial efficiency started to really overtake the concept of growth at all costs and so on. And it was the year where businesses started to evolve how they operated. Cash got expensive. It wasn't a case of just raising your way to growth. Businesses did really transform. And I still do believe that a lot of businesses are probably in the midst of that transformation. But David, I know you mentioned ESG because it's I think a factor of even more change that will have to happen over the coming months and years. It's very much like when it rains, it pours. What do you think, David? What are the big landscape changes you're seeing this year? What are the things that are on the horizon?
So there's a couple of big changes coming. Some are VAT based in the compliance reports, which don't reflect into ESG, but that will have a big impact. And some systems will fall over and force external reporting. But environmental is going to be key. So people more and more need to know, what's the actual, carbon footprint of an item that's travelled and how it's travelled and how it's been managed throughout its life cycle. How effective, and sustainable are the businesses being responsible to both their customers and their suppliers, and how they source and how they manage the items. And the noise is there for a reason. This is going to become a form of compliance for certain levels of businesses that will be disseminated, and people like Gibran will be forced to go and create and capture this data and manipulate and report accordingly, either because it's the correct marketing reporting tool, or it becomes a compliant, government-driven compliance. And hopefully we'll see platforms adding AI and automation and other elements to assist with the process. But at the end of the day, we have to have the fundamentals to be ready.
Yeah, absolutely. And Millie, maybe from your side, like how are any of these changes kind of rearing their heads in the world of kind of AP automation, expense management, and so on?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think to go off of what David was saying as well, that we've been seeing more and more regulations coming into place. I mean, look at the e-invoicing regulation that is coming into force across the EU. Look at what's happening with Irish revenue, digitization of expense reporting. I think that that's really just the first aspect of it. And we're going to see more and more of these regulations come into place that's actually going to make it so that, looking towards tech to support for data accuracy is actually going to become more of a must-have. than a nice to have for a lot of businesses. But it's going to be how to guide those businesses maybe that are going from not using any sort of tech or limited through that journey of digital transformation as well, which is a lot of the mixture of the conversations that I'm having. There's a lot of businesses that I'm speaking with who haven't maybe been using anything at all. Also others who have tried to implement certain systems to look after certain things, maybe one to look after their card payments, another to look after approvals. But ultimately, they might just have kind of that missing piece in between that's causing some challenges. So I think we're going to see a lot of changes focused towards really that's just the changes within the market and regulations that are coming into force.
Absolutely. And Gibran, from your side, I'd love to get on both sides, both from the Kolleno customer standpoint, but even from yourself. How are you even navigating this in your head above all else?
Yeah, I think David and Millie touched on, some of the key points. I think, ESG is certainly at the forefront, especially with the conversations that we're having with clients. I think from a regulatory perspective, we're also keeping a keen eye on that. And I think as we start to have, newer technologies kind of emerge, so if we're thinking, a lot of the Gen AI, for example, that we've seen over the last year, I think what we're going to see in 2024 and beyond is really, some thinking from policymakers around, potential regulations around that. And so, for us as a tech company, it's, what are those regulations? How do you kind of, navigate those, and how do we kind of help our clients and make sure, that everything is in line with those elements as well.
Yeah, it's getting into quite a complicated world there, which I find very interesting in the way that a lot of things can be streamlined and can now be made even more efficient with the advent of things like Gen AI. But at the same time, on the back end, there's almost new levels of complexity for people to think through. And Millie, I think, as you mentioned, especially those companies that are going from 0 to 100. It's all well and good being that company that has dipped your toe in or are kind of gone all in on some softwares. But it's that transformation that many companies that now are forced to do, not wanted to do. That to me is going to be the interesting one. And David, I don't know if you're working with many partner or many clients in that space, but I'd love to get your perspective. Well, what are the tips? How do you start to overcome this transformation that may be needed?
So I think the first thing to do is be realistic about what you have and how fit for purpose it is. That's certainly one element. And luckily, there's tools such as Spendesk, Kolleno, Avalara, others that can help bridge a gap. Whether that's a long-term picture, to be seen, but I think for businesses, there's lots of tools out there that can help bridge the gap. And whilst there are limitations in certain systems, you can do a lot to take a step change rather than have a massive big bang. So I think that the fact that you're being forced in a lot of ways, in the way you're saying this, Paddy, because of compliance and changes, it can be a scary budget for some businesses to, kind of swallow and plan for. So to take baby steps, do what is essential and manage that in a sensible fashion, because then the change management comes into piece with this, and then work with your partners to see what their customers are doing to adopt, take leading practice, take best approach, speak about what's working and not working for them, and of course take the advice from your financial and tax advisors as well alongside this journey. So it's quite a scary landscape, but we're all in it together to try and get the best outcome for all of those businesses.
Yeah, absolutely. And Millie, you might be seeing the same. But what are you seeing? I suppose from the best side. Or what are the most innovative CFOs that you're seeing? What are the great examples of people are really adopting, looking like?
Yeah, I mean, I have a recent example that comes to mind. I started working with a CFO of a company that had 6 legal entities across US, UK, and in France. And she had come in about a year before, when the business was in very much a manual state. So even though they actually had quite a lot of employees, they had super high volume of invoices, a lot of spend across entities. They didn't have anything in place to actually be able to support their team within the most efficient way. So when she started speaking to me, she knew that there was time for a change, but she needed a system really that she could trust. And I think really for her, it was important to understand implementation and ongoing support. So really what was driving the entire project as well, when you look at a company that has spend across multiple entities, the visibility was really actually the most important thing for her. So it comes back to what we were speaking about earlier in terms of data accuracy. If you don't have a streamlined process in place, and by streamlined, I mean purely maybe like digitized and having everything consolidated, it means that the data can't purely be totally accurate, which was actually making it difficult for her to have the right data in place to make strategic decisions, to drive forward the business, really. So ultimately for her, it was about going through the process of identifying, how can we actually guide the business through that type of digital transformation, lay out the right success metrics, but ultimately really make a success out of it and get them the goal that they were looking to reach on that side.
Nice. And are you finding, because side note, I was at a breakfast this morning with our friends from Gong and G2 Crowd, and what they were saying, which I thought was really, really interesting, is right now from their data, the number one buying decision, and it's across the board, but let's face it, right now the CFO is signing off on pretty much any software expense, I would think. The number one buying decision is actually on ease of implementation versus even ROI at this stage. Is that what you're seeing as well?
Yeah, actually, to be honest, more and more, because I think that it's so important that a business understands what's going to happen after they actually decide to move on with a piece of tech. I mean, whether it's Spendesk or any other one. A lot of businesses have been burned in the past. I think I'm hearing loads of stories at the moment, to be honest, with different businesses that I'm speaking with. So actually, one of the key kind of decision criteria that they might have is understanding how can we make implementation a success. As and when the business changes as well, they want to understand if we're double in size, we need to look at new priorities for finance for the business. How are you as a solution going to actually support us on, molding kind of the system and the platform in place in line with those types of changes as well? Like I'd say it's absolutely key. It's coming up in every single conversation that I'm having.
Yeah. I thought it was just so interesting because ROI kind of speaks for itself, of course. But the fact to see ease of implementation even now becoming a bigger decision driver than ROI, I thought was very, very interesting. David, I'm sure you've ran hundreds, if not thousands, of implementations. What are the tips for someone in finance if you've made the decision, you want to dip your toe and you want to transform? I know the scary stats about implementation failure rates, especially with ERPs or CRMs, etc. What are the top tips here?
So if you're going to make an investment into a solution architecture, let's say, that may have 4 or 5 elements to it, including IPaaS or commerce or expenses, lean on what they do best. So the biggest problem to deny an easy implementation or cause complex customization or deviation is trying to shoehorn what you've done because of your system limitations into that new architecture. What we should be doing is looking at, well, what is the rationale? What is the outcome? What is the journey that this new solution architecture needs to go on to achieve the same goal? The reason implementations often fail is that it is the change management. We're not change management experts, but the transition of someone who's done something that way for 15 years because they are limited by the way they have to do it, as opposed to, I need to get from A to B. How does this system architecture achieve it? Let's not try and just repeat the steps we have to take and repeat the things we're doing now. That's where implementations fail, because your adoption goes, your understanding goes, and actually you don't get the best value out of the technology you're investing in.
So almost in the sense you got to kind of start small, think big. Just figure out what is the core use case I need to check off, and then figure out, even think bigger picture, longer term.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the MVP approach, right? It's getting the right value day one quickly, and then that will already give you value. Then start to invest in the additional value adds and the should haves and the could haves as you've got time, because as a business as well, the other point is businesses underestimate the effort it takes internally to get a successful implementation of anything. So, doing it all at once won't happen. It's not sensible, but getting the value, then adding over time and iterating is the best way, in my experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And Gibran, I know firsthand internally that there's things that we're implementing, there's things that we're changing. What have you learned?
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more with the points that David and Millie, put forth. I think, the key for me is really kind of resonates kind of three things. I think at the start, really thinking through strategy, because even if you do your MVP and you do your MVP small, what you don't want to do is just to rush in and do an MVP that doesn't fit in with your grander, kind of strategic, idea. So I think taking the time to just take a step back, think strategically about what's in place, what's needed, how you can enhance that, what's the first step within that enhancement that you can start with. And then I think through going through that, the ease of implementation and then ROI. And I would look at ROI from two perspectives. Of course, the financial, but also, from a team and resource perspective as well. Right? How do you bring them along in the journey? And how does that impact, the day-to-day on that end? So for me, I see that as kind of like very much a transformation journey that really starts with setting up the strategy really at the beginning, starting small, building out, evaluating, and then continuing to refine and enhance from there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's that second point, I think, is so underestimated in many ways. Is, it might give you great ROI on paper. You can see that, anyone can do the maths. But the thing that it's the hidden cost that you have with any change, in particular any sort of implementation, any sort of kind of change management you have to do, is how much time, effort will this take for the rest of your organization, whether it's your I suppose close team or else the wider organization for a larger project, and how much time and focus is that distracting away from your core value prop and what you do as a business. And that to me, I think it from everything I've seen in certainly over the last 6 to 9 months, that to me is I suppose the hidden cost that people really do need to estimate for themselves. Very good, very good. So what we've discussed to date is, I think first of all, some of the challenges get in the way. We know there's regulation. We know that, the data is a big thing and you have to get on top of your data to make informed decisions. When you do then decide to do that, it's about, choosing the right tools, solutions, projects, whatever that might be, and making sure that you go all in and making sure you get the implementation right. But I suppose they're just kind of common themes. But when we think more personally, what I'd love to do is start to get more of the panel's kind of thoughts on the year ahead. We've talked about, some of the things that we know are going to happen, some of the regulations that may come in. I don't think you can do a webinar in 2024 and not talk about AI, but more, I'd love to get more in detail, maybe across the panel of kind of what do you think are the big predictions for the year? What are we going to see in 2024 when it comes to the office of the CFO, when it comes to finance in general? David, I might ask you to kick it off.
Sure. And we kind of touched on this before, Paddy. I mean, businesses are going to have to think more innovatively. They're going to have to think about how they, maximize their revenue streams, maximize, the revenue they're getting out of the current customer base. Think about additional services or products that they might be able to deliver. Think about other collaborations where co-joined revenue streams might be able to be considered. But what's going to obviously form part of that is AI. So AI generation in prompting for supply chain issues, prompting for potential churn or drop-off. AI will become more and more pivotal in suggested actions and responses. I think that is a given. Whilst we're seeing a drop-off in some of the investment into the AI businesses now from the equity firms, there's still a massive step change to happen within the product area for digital products that we're all talking about here. And that's going to mean that the finance team, the CFOs, are going to have to, again, have that data, be able to model, be able to look at the impact, and be able to track those agile changes, those service requirements, those adaptations to increase the profit margin, perhaps on what is a static business or revenue stream. It all comes back to data, AI, planning, integrated data, knowing what the expenses are, increasing cash days, so aged debtor days. Cash is king. Supply chains are getting tighter. Service levels are becoming more important. All of this is driven around, and I see AI supporting it massively. Planning around integrated data and modeling, becoming even more prevalent than it ever has been now in such a difficult marketplace.
Absolutely. Gibran?
Yeah, I think I agree with the points David raised. I think for 2024, I think the other element, at least from a finance perspective, is I think as we look to all of the advances in technology, I think a number of other kind of teams internally have kind of adopted, like sales teams, et cetera, have been embracing technology to kind of help with their workflows and processes. And so what I expect to see in 2024, especially as we start to see inflation start to moderate and all of these other elements, is I think finance teams really expediting their own adoption of technology internally across the board, across industry. And so, thinking through, what that strategy looks like, how these different elements play into it, how it can help inform their own decision making, how it can help inform their own growth. And so I think what we'll see is a number of finance teams, continuing to push for that adoption to help improve their workflows and enhance their processes.
Very good. Very good. And finally, Millie, love to get your thoughts here.
Yeah, absolutely. Agree with the others' points as well. I think that maybe just in terms of what I think that we're going to see a lot of in 2024 is, just to go on what I even said previously about more regulations obviously coming in place. I think that what we're going to see is actually that finance teams will have more options than ever in terms of tech solutions that they can explore to be able to solve for these regulations that are coming in force. I think that this is going to maybe just being something that is becoming more of a must-have than a nice-to-have could maybe change the way that they look at digital transformation. The types of kind of internal needs analysis that they need to do before looking at different solutions. I think it's also going to mean that different solutions get more innovative as well. I would imagine, AI is obviously a very, very common topic. We're seeing it everywhere, but I think we're going to see it really just building into every aspect of different solutions as well. How can we utilize AI to make things like bookkeeping more efficient, drive better data accuracy, maybe even improve the implementation process and onboarding for certain businesses with different solutions. So I just imagine that with the regulations coming in place, the transformation from maybe nice to haves to absolute must haves will drive, just more the space becoming more busy, more interesting, innovative solutions coming in place. And of course, seeing the different ways that we can just really use AI. Another thought that I do have is that we might see more collaboration between finance and IT as well. Because if you think of security requirements, what's really important to businesses, especially when it comes to financial data, we look at AI coming in. I think that finance will we'll see them working much more closely with IT to make sure that systems that are in place are really fitting what their requirements are on that side and any kind of changing requirements within the landscape. So that's kind of what I imagine we're going to see in 2024.
Very good. Very good. And I know no one asked me, but I'm going to give you my predictions as well because I just can't resist. Again, you're all the experts, and I couldn't agree more with everything said. But the things I do think are going to be interesting this year is, number one, I think this is going to be the real year of the finance business partner. We've seen more and more finance business partnering with the rest of the organization, I think, over the last 3 or 4 years. But to me, I think the best companies this year are going to be the ones that finance can really embed themselves within the operations of the business and really partner effectively. Not through just necessity of trying to relook at cash flow, but towards trying to find new opportunities within the business. Second thing, I think we're going to see maybe towards the second half of this year, and into 25 and 26, I think we are looking at the verge of a great consolidation of tech tools. I think over the last 4 or 5 years, you have seen a proliferation, and I'm taking from kind of sales and marketing tools as a, I suppose, a starting point here. I think you had a tool for everything 3 or 4 years ago. Now you can see all of those tools are slowly becoming one. And I think that that's slowly going to happen potentially in the finance space, which is good and bad. The good bit is, there's better value for consumers and customers and finance buyers. The bad is that maybe you find tools that do 80% of the job when before you had 3 tools that did 100% of the job. So I think you're going to see a lot of change and consolidation on tools. And then I think the third thing that I think is going to be interesting, and this is my perennial optimism showing through. I think there is reasons to be optimistic. Now, maybe not immediately, but there is some indications that economies are turning, interest rates, that the interest rate hikes are working, especially when you think about in the States. And there's some very good positive indications that I think the world will, not say return to a bit of normality, because I don't think the last 2 years were normal, but maybe it will even out a little bit, but potentially not in 2024. So it's probably looking at 25 and maybe even beyond then. But what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing of a lot is when businesses are free from the constraints of what they had to do over the last 2 years, which was hire, recruit, buy tools, constantly on the run of the rat race that is cheap money and just grow. It creates space when they're not doing that. And from everything I'm seeing, I think 24 is going to be the year of the big finance project. So the project you've been putting off for 2 years, whether it's changing your reporting structure, whether it is moving that ERP, whether it is updating all of your systems. I really do think that 2024 is going to be that year. So they're my bold predictions. Happy to catch up in a year's time, and you can all tell me how wrong I was. Right. We're on the final stretch now, folks. I do want to let you know there is a Q&A. So if you do want to drop in any questions, you can find a Q&A, I think, on the bottom bar. So please do be forthcoming with your questions. We will save certainly 10, 15 minutes for any discussion here. But probably last couple of follow-up questions I have here. It is going to be maybe a little bit more specific because we do have a Spendesk and Kolleno on the call. Is when we think about this year, what do we think are going to be the big changes in say spend management, in AP management, and of course in cash collection? What are the big trends we're going to see? What are the things that people should be aware of looking into this year and beyond?
I can hop in here. I think that just thinking about the types of trends that we'd see, maybe looking just from a Spendesk perspective, which is looking at all things kind of accounts payable, expenses, cards, is really with these market trends that we're probably going to see in terms of the regulations coming in place, that businesses want to keep more control than ever over company money that's being spent. So I imagine that more businesses will, again, lean on really looking at internal needs analysis. So this was something that I mentioned previously as well. I think that we're going to see more and more businesses either completing an internal needs analysis or maybe using a consultant to also help with the completion of that internal analysis to see what gaps they have to fill within their process, and really taking on that that analysis to then implement certain changes. From my experience, I've often seen that businesses can go through changes in different ways as well. You might have a phased approach. You might have businesses that want to tackle everything all at once. But what I've seen be the biggest success is probably when you do an internal needs analysis, figuring out what the top priority is. If, the overarching goal is to improve your data accuracy and visibility over maybe your reporting, for example, and the vast majority of your expenses are via accounts payable and invoices, maybe the first thing to tackle is how to really streamline that process. Make sure you have the right measures of, reducing risk of duplication of payments, paying your suppliers on time, but also making sure that everything is coded correctly. Maybe that's the first thing that you transform, and then you look at a phased approach at potentially looking after the second part of your operational spending processes. It's the way just to make sure that if you do things in kind of a grouped way, that you're going to see value and impact instead of maybe just trying to do it all at once, just from my experience.
Good.
Yeah. And I think, just going on the, revenue side of things, I think, as we go into 2024, I think, utilization of, new technologies to help, with receivables and to help enhance financial operations is going to be, certainly top of mind. I think it's going to be very much a focus on, how do we enhance these processes? How do we make it more efficient with the team? Because as you mentioned, Patty, part of the shifting role of finance teams is really shifting to become much more strategic, right? And helping all elements of the business, right? Not just focusing on the financial reporting and all of these elements, but working with IT, working with other teams to help achieve other objectives. So I think it's going to be, with the focus on revenue, how do we utilize technology to help improve our receivables and collections processes? As we go through that, how do we improve our workflows to help our team save time so that they can focus on the higher value add elements? How do we improve the data and information that we have on that to improve our processes, to improve our reporting? So I think these are going to be all, some of the key elements. And I think within that, there's also going to be very much a focus as we're talking, externally on collections, how do we do that in a way that really focuses on doing it in the most effective way with our clients, right? Not harming client relationships, but really being cognizant of, the best methods to improve those, working with our clients, improve our policies, improve our written communications, our approach. And so that's where tools like Gen AI and other elements can come in and can help as well. And so for me, there's really that focus. I think the revenue focus will persist, but it's how do we use technology to improve and enhance those workflows and processes, and utilizing other technologies, Gen AI, et cetera, to help further optimize.
Very good. Very good. And before we get into a few questions, David, I might ask you for any last parting words of wisdom to our audience today. As you look forward to 2024, and then we can jump into some questions.
Yeah, no, I think there's been some changes. We've seen investment slow and funding rounds slow into businesses. So actually, just to follow on from the sessions with Millie and Jibran, it's cash is king, right? So it's never been more important to control your spend, think about where and how businesses are spending and managing expenses and travel and hotels and overheads and supplier controls. But equally, we think about businesses who may have invoice discounting or equivalent funding rounds. If they can improve their AR facility to bring cash debt days down by 15 days, 20 days, they can potentially save a fortune in funding investment. So because businesses are having to look inwardly so much, and yes, technology will help enable that, there's value there. So whilst I appreciate ROI is not always the driver, it's there and it's measurable and it's achievable. So I think, that's kind of the takeaway I'd just add on to the comments made there.
Absolutely. Great. Well, we've got a couple of questions. So I might fire these out. I think we've 3 questions now, but please do keep them coming. So question number 1. How is financial regulation evolving to address the challenges and opportunities presented by fintech innovations? Do regulations keep up with the innovations in your view? Right, who's our regulation expert here?
Well, happy to jump in here. I think, from having sat in the policymaker's role in a previous life, I think there's a lot of factors that really need to be taken into account. I mean, technology and especially within the fintech space, there's a lot of changes that are happening day to day, and I think policymakers are trying their best to keep up with that. So I think regulators are putting in place certain regulations and elements to help try and keep up with it. But I think the evolution is so quick. I mean, Gen AI, just take a look over the last 12 months and how that's kind of permeated across. And so I think regulations will probably lag. I think for myself and our team, and for other CFOs, I think the key is, as you're going through these different implementations, just trying to really think ahead, right? And be very cognizant of what's coming down the pipeline, what's in place, and what could potentially come in, and just trying to make sure that you mitigate against that.
Very good, very good. And then actually following up on that, there is a question that is more AI driven. How important will it be to incorporate AI this year, or do you think it's still in its infancy and we will benefit more once it's developed further? David, I don't know, how much are you seeing AI come up and your view of it?
So AI planning and provisioning is definitely in place, but actually in deployment, it's in its infancy. And AI is being assumed to be a risk and a solution. So a risk to jobs, a risk to headcount, a risk to people's livelihoods. And I think what we'll see this year particularly is a rationalized adoption of AI and the value to, again, prompt and suggest what we should be investigating or trends that are deviating from what we ask AI to identify. And then I think we'll see AI being adopted in some, not all areas. AI has been around by a form of workflow in effect for many years. In fact, AI has just taken it to a step change beyond that. And you're always going to need that human interaction. So I actually think it's in its infancy from an adoption and a platform point of view. I think we'll see that mature over the next 2 to 3 years. I think this year will be quite transformative, but I think it will be a smaller step change in 2024, personally.
And Millie, from just on the AI topic, how much are you hearing about this on a daily basis? Like, are people asking for this for the sake of asking for it, or are you seeing actually requests for some really innovative use cases?
Yeah, I think that sometimes people are asking for AI and they don't actually realize that's what they're asking for. So what I mean by that is a lot of it is to do with automation, right? So a lot of systems have various different ways that they can build AI into, let's say, some of the non-value adding but very necessary tasks. So I think that what I often hear is, how can we use AI and maybe some automation to actually just drive more value adding work in our existing employee base? So it's like David said, not necessarily replacing jobs. Although I know this is a hot topic in AI in general, but how can we actually incorporate AI to really take over things like, I mean, for example, receipt chasing, maybe manual payment runs of invoices, these types of things. Maybe some automation when it comes to bookkeeping, so that somebody doesn't have to necessarily manually code up 1,000 transactions in a given month. What we have to look at is opportunity of being able to gain back that time for those companies. So I think that when AI is really coming up, it's just about uncovering value in existing employees. How can we help our finance teams and actually the business overall just really achieve their objectives, focus on the most important projects that they have at hand. So that's kind of how I'm seeing it at the moment. And I'm sure it's going to obviously evolve quite a lot as we see more innovation within AI as well. Probably things we don't even know how it's going to be built in. It's quite exciting to think of how it's going to evolve.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the facts I heard was it took ChatGPT, I think was it 1 month to get to 100 million users. Or sorry, something crazy like that, which is just shows you, and that's only what 13, 14 months ago when it dropped. It's pretty stark to see the level of progress here, and I'm sure there's only more to come. So definitely in its infancy, but certainly one to keep an eye on. Right, we got a couple more, and we might call it after that. So, Gibran, this might be more, I suppose, Kolleno focused, but in what ways is software influencing customer relationship management and finance?
Mm-hmm. So I would say, part of the shifting role of the finance team is, very much kind of more of an external facing than I think before. So a lot of finance teams are now, interacting more and more with, external clients. And when you talk through, your receivables process, for example, you're going to be interacting with clients of the company, following up on payments and all of these different elements. So I think technology helps to simplify it in a few different ways. I think one, it helps to really simplify the actual workflow process. So helps you keep track of, who you need to actually follow up with. What are the best ways to communicate with them, and especially if you're talking about Gen AI, things like ChatGPT, et cetera, to help provide, some suggestions in terms of, best ways to approach. And then I think, from a client interaction, it really helps in that perspective. And then I think the flip side of that is, internally within the business, technology will also help, ameliorate policies as you go through, right? So as you're working through with a variety of different clients, being able to have that data and information around, their payments, and helping to inform, how you hand out credit and enhance your credit policies, I think is key.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd actually echo an awful lot of that. I think one of the interesting things about, I suppose, that customer relationship with the advent of so many new software tools and so many things that you can do, what I suggest you're gonna start to see is a much more kind of collaborative ownership of that relationship of the customer. It's not like the old days where you had an account manager who managed the customer via Rolodex on the desk. It is now, you can have 4 or 5 different touch points with that customer, and that customer will start to understand that there's different people within that organization that is there to support them. And I think that that's where you're really going to see, software really support this, whether that is on, helping the financial side or whether it's on the account management side and so on. So I think it's going to be really, really interesting to see how the customer relationship does change and how many more people from a business can be now involved in that customer relationship. Right, and David, I might let you again have last word on just the last question we have here, which is, what can finance teams do now to effectively prepare for AI?
So there's probably two aspects to this. One is obviously to identify where they can benefit, and see great value for efficiencies, as Millie quite rightly pointed out, or automated postings based on, pre-configured rules there's certainly one element. If we're doing OCR scanning, whatever it is we're doing to assist in, removing manual laborious tasks and really getting AI to flag the exceptions or flag the things we need to pay attention to. But the second aspect I would say to this is, as finance teams gain efficiency, there's a couple of things to consider. Is the business on a growth curve, i.e., so can that business then adopt AI to be able to scale and grow while keeping a lean finance team without adding heads? Or secondly, what strategically can the finance team do to add other value to the business? So it might be looking at, potential programs they can implement. It might be looking at different models. So do we need to take advantage of early settlement discounts? Do we need to look at customer rebates for tiers? Are there other initiatives we could do to add additional value rather than just do the mundane tasks that poor old finance always get left with? So that kind of sums that up as far as we know at the moment for the adoption of AI from my perspective.
Very good. Very good. Well, listen, it certainly is going to be the theme of the year. I'm very much certain about that. So folks, I wanted to say thank you all very much for the questions, for taking the time to join us. I might just go one last time quickly around the panel if they want to learn more about you or your respective businesses. What's the go-to? So Gibran.
Certainly. So if you'd like to learn a little bit more about Kolleno, please visit our website, www.kolleno.com. Feel free to also reach out to me directly on LinkedIn. Happy to connect with anyone and engage.
Very much, Millie.
Yeah, same for me, really. If you did want to learn a little bit more about Spendesk, you can always go to spendesk.com. We also do have a community for CFOs called CFO Connect. Feel free to check that out as well. But of course, if you did want to speak with me directly, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I am Millie Hughes on LinkedIn, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Very good. David?
Yeah, same applies. Please, anything you'd like to know about Staria services, it's staria.com. Again, please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. But equally, please reach out through, Kolleno have kindly organised the webinar. We'll be doing follow-ups. So hopefully if an in-person event is suitable to learn more about any of the topics we've discussed, please feed that back through Kolleno and we'll follow up with these guys in due course.
Very good. All right, folks, thank you very much. Likewise, you can find me on LinkedIn. I also have a grand total of 38 Twitter followers, so I would love to increase that number, so feel free to follow me there. But overall, thank you very much.
It's now X, Paddy. It's now X.
It shows how often I use it, David. It's great to get everyone together. We hope you found the conversation useful and interesting. As mentioned, we will organize a kind of get together fireside chat style, I suppose, round 2. So at some point in late February, we will follow up with those details alongside a recording, which should be out in the next kind of 48 to 72 hours. So thank you all very much. Hope you found it useful and wish you all the best of luck for the rest of the day.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Paddy.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.